Hello, everyone. I hope you're all safe and well. My name is Danesh-Mand, and it's my pleasure delivering this short presentation to you today. As you're probably aware, to further support the students undertaking the subject of Advanced Project Risk Management 15317, a number of additional online training material have been developed. These short targeted presentations will hopefully help you to better identify and understand the key aspects of this topic for your further studies. However, I would like to highlight that please note this material should be only used as a supplementary, not as a replacement for full training documents and references, which have been already provided for this subject, and you do have access to them through the system. So please refer to the university's course online platform or contact your lecturer to access and discuss full set of training material for this subject. With that, a quick introduction to the session. Let's start on the topic for today, which is the contingency allocation. You do see my email address there as well, and the phone number as well. So happy to support you further if there is any questions. A quick outline related to a number of sessions that we do have them available, and you can actually use them. So a couple of case studies on the quantitative risk analysis. There is a short video on the risk and contingency management. We do have the schedule contingency calculation or determination, very similar for the cost contingency determination as well. The presentation today, which is for contingency allocation, the session 5, and there is another session for contingency controls. There might be some future sessions as well become available, but at this stage, these are the sets of 6 sessions that they're available on this subject of contingency management. A quick introduction here before we started the presentation. As I said, I'm currently with KPMG Australia. I'm a director with KPMG Australia. I'm mainly helping clients from the government and private sector who are developing and delivering major infrastructure projects. From a background perspective, I'm a civil engineer. I got my first master in hydraulic and infrastructure and structure design, but I never became a designer. 15, close to 20 years ago, I decided to go back to uni, and I did my master in project construction management, project controls, and the application of risk engineering, especially from the quantitative perspective in delivering major projects. And over the last 15 years, I was mainly working, and I still am, helping clients to expand their capabilities in terms of using the risk engineering and trying to improve the risk-based decision-making processes in terms of managing the projects and defining the projects and running them. So it's quite interesting journey. I'm also part of Risk Engineering Society, or RES. Over the last 20 years, I'm currently president in New South Wales with this organization, and we are one of the technical associations under Engineers Australia. So if you are interested to know a bit more about us or get involved, we do have a website. Obviously, it is Engineers Australia. You can just search for us, or we do have a LinkedIn group that you're more than welcome to join us, and also myself. Please send me an invitation, and I'm definitely happy to support you in your journey. In terms of the presentation today, I need to highlight that everything that I will share with you today, it's my own personal experience and views, and do not reflect or represent the the official policy position or recommendation of KPMG Australia, Engineers Australia, or RES. And obviously, if you would like to refer to any of those material, please note that these are just has a general nature and should not be used for any decision making without further assessment. Okay, so we have done the first step. So let's get into the topic now. But before we get to the topic of today, which is the contingency allocation, I would like to take you just through some of the basic, just in case you haven't done the other sessions. So when you look at the risk management overall, and the best document or the document that we are referring to in Australia is ISO 31000, the edition 2018, which is the latest one. And the risk management based on that standard does have three pillars. One is the framework, which we will see the circle here. And it's mainly around the leadership and commitment regarding the risk management, designing, implementation, evaluation, improvement, and integration into the decision making. That's the framework. There are a number of principles associated with the risk management, which generally actually are related to the creating the value and making sure that you protect the value. And eventually it's quite important because you can easily see, or I personally have seen a number of, or many organizations that the risk management became a tick box, became part of the process, but not adding value to the organization or its operation or its objectives. It's so important, and that's quite a new concept that came in the latest edition of ISO 31000, which is quite fundamentally is changing the view from risk management. Risk management is not a tick box, and it shouldn't be. It should be around creating the value and adding value to the organization and protecting value, making sure that it's helping organization to achieve its objectives. And the last but not the least is the process, which you do see here in this pillar. And the risk management process does have a number of key elements into it, like creating the context, setting the criteria, defining the scope of it, having the risk assessment, which does have 3 steps of identification, analysis, and evaluation, then the risk treatment, and at the same time, communication, consultation, monitoring and review, and recording, which is overall, we'll have and this is, the other thing is that it's an iterative process, it's just ongoing, as you can see with those arrows. And that's overall the process. So how does this picture link with contingency? If you put some treatment actions against some of the risks that they're not acceptable, you get to the point that for some of the risk after the treatment's in place, if the residual risk still is not acceptable. So in other words, you look at the risk and you see, no, the risk is, the likelihood is still is high, the score is high, the risk is still I cannot accept the risk. However, further treatment is not possible, or it might not be visible. Then in that sort of scenarios, you look at it and I said, you know what? There is nothing else that I can do or I don't want to do at this stage to bring the risk down, but I do need some contingency in my pocket, and it might be from a dollar perspective or it might be from a time perspective, that if the risk happens, I have some allowances to address that. And the contingency is the concept that appears there. So that's how it works in terms of the relationship between the risk management process and the concept of contingency. So when it comes to the contingency, I think we just discussed that is a specific allocation of resources. It might be cost, resources, or time. And it's an addition into the base estimate and base schedule. But there are a number of probably few key fundamental notes that I would like to highlight here. And one is that I've seen a number of cases, or many cases, that the people or the project teams, they use contingency as a replacement for proper cost estimation. And what it means is that the team, rather than trying to spend as much as possible and using as many as details that are available for the project to prepare a proper cost estimate, they're just using a very rough ballpark cost estimate, and then they put a huge contingency on top of it. That's not recommended. You need to make sure that you spend as much as time and information available. You need to use them to get a proper cost estimate in place, and then in addition, then you start to have a conversation about contingency. Contingency, the second one, contingency shouldn't be included in the base estimate. Again, a good example is that I was going through some tunnel, not a major tunnel, it was just a small tunnel for electrical pipeline and electrical cables. And then I realized that as soon as I started to review the cost estimate, I realized that and then I was comparing them against the basis of estimate and basis of schedule to see how those assumptions link to the result. And I realized that different teams started to put some fat, we call them, or allowances, or whatever you want to call it, or contingency at the team level, at the individual level, into different places of the base estimate. And by the time the cost estimate was almost ready, then there was another contingency overall for the whole thing. And then I said, look, guys, you can actually, it's okay, but the problem is you already got some sort of very heavy overestimated cost, because you're putting contingencies in different places. And then on top of it, when you get to the end of the process, then on the top, you're adding another contingency for the whole thing. And that's not a good practice. In other words, it's not the optimum price. And you might ask, but what's the problem? The problem is, if you're a contractor and you're having the overestimated cost, let's assume that you're going for a lump sum or lump sum contract, you will not win the job. It's just simple as that, because in a competitive environment, you're asking for more money, so you will not get the job. If you win it, that would be perfect, but you don't get the job. And that's the problem. So the challenge for a lot of organizations is that how much is optimum to win and deliver the project. The other keynote is that if there is a undesirable event that is highly likely, and I mean highly likely is quite there is no definition for it, but generally, I mean, for example, if when we are doing the cost estimate, our teams, I generally recommend people that if there is something that is 80% likely to happen, we better assume that it will happen, and we take it out from contingency and we put it into the base estimate or base schedule, not in the contingency calculation. And the last but not the least is the contingency shouldn't and doesn't include the escalation. One of the documents that I strongly recommend you to refer and have a look is this contingency guideline published by Risk Engineering Society in the first edition in 2016, and the second edition was published in 2019. So the document does cover almost all aspects of contingency management, as you can see from the determination for both schedule and cost, for the allocation, which is the subject of today, to controls, going through the phase, going through the project life cycle, going to the different levels of project, program, and portfolio, linking the contingency and project performance, and also it does have the cover for the government requirements in Australia. So it's quite a good, and in addition, it does provide you with further references as well. So it's a good starting point to give you the whole, the picture, all the key elements of this topic, and then it will provide you with the with further references available as well. Uh, in terms of the process, and now I think the rest of the slides that we will discuss today, it's referring to the guideline, risk contingency guideline. Overall process for contingency management does have three aspects or three elements or three portions of determination, which is the calculation, how much. Contingency allocation, which is for today discussion, is where and the who, which really is trying to answer when you talk about the allocation. The first question is, yes, we know how much it is now. The question is, where should we put it, and who owns that and how much? So that's some sort of distribution of contingency, which we call it contingency allocation. And the last but not the least is contingency control. In other words, how do we report that? And for the control, as I said earlier, there is another session that will refer to it. But the purpose of today is the contingency allocation. As I said, we calculated the contingency, so we know how much now we do have or we need to have. The second one is that where should we put that? When it comes to the allocation, I thought, and even the rest is putting it that way, there are two aspects. One is the schedule allocation, the other one is cost allocation. So you set the time because the contingency is for both time and cost, right? It might be, I mean, in some scenarios, you may not have a time contingency, but eventually the concept is the same. So you need to have a schedule contingency and cost contingency. So let's have a look in the schedule contingency first. In terms of the allocation, and that's the same for both cost and schedule, there are two-dimensional allocation. One is the vertical, the other one is horizontal. And exactly the same when you have the cost contingency, we have vertical allocation and we have horizontal. So now you started to see the structure of the allocation. So let's have a look in the schedule first. In other words, like for example, you develop a base schedule and the project is finishing in 2 years. So that's the duration. You do the calculation, and please, if you haven't done it, please refer to the schedule contingency determination session or other materials that are available in the system. You assess the schedule contingency, and let's assume that you got 3 months, right? Over 2 years, you decided that, or you decided that you need 3 months of contingency, not 3 years, 3 months of schedule contingency. Vertical allocation means who owns. It's actually vertical is referring to the organization org chart, and the question is who owns how much of that 3 months. Let me explain a little bit more. If you do have 3 months, do you give it to the project manager and the site team, the whole team? In other words, if they're late for a day, excavation is late for a day, do they have access to that 3 months so they can easily refer it? The whole 3 months, do you give it to the project team, or do you give nothing to them and just keep it at the general manager or project director level? So in other words, the project manager doesn't have any contingency from a schedule perspective. If they need to, if they're late by a week, they have to go back, the team and the project manager, he or she, has to go back to the project director and ask for a week contingency. In other words, the project director will keep the whole bucket of schedule contingency in his or her pocket and then spend it as required. So that's the vertical. Or in some of the projects actually because some of those major projects we are dealing with 5 years, 6 years duration, and the contingency might be up to, I don't know, 6, 7 months sometimes in some scenarios. And you can imagine it's quite fundamentally is important who owns the contingency. If you're at the project director or general manager or even as an executive, you don't want to keep it until it's too late. You don't want to, you just want to make sure that you manage the expectation. You just want to make sure that if things have started not working properly, you want to be aware of them and stop them. And that's the vertical allocation. Who owns and how much vertically. The other one is horizontally. So horizontally generally is referred to the project level. So let's assume that from a previous example, you had 3 months. You decided that 50% of that 3 months goes with PM, project manager, and 50% goes up to the project director. So if you're a project manager, now you got 1.5 months, 1.5 months extra, which is the schedule contingency. Where do you put that? Do you keep it at the end of the project? In other words, you said, I have 2 years plus a month and a half contingency, or do you split it based on the month by month? Do you do it based on the disciplines? Like you said, out of that a month and a half, I keep a couple of weeks for excavation and the rest for the structure, for example. How do you do that? And that's the horizontal allocation. And there are a number of different ways that you can allocate the schedule contingency. So please, from a horizontal perspective, so please refer to the full training material or the guideline if you would like to get further details. Next one is schedule contingency, and schedule contingency exactly similar to cost contingency is similarly to schedule allocation. We do have 2 dimensions. One is the vertical, the other one is horizontal. The vertical is that very similar to the schedule. When you set the base estimate and you set the contingency from a dollar perspective, who owns that contingency? If your project is $100 million and then you set the contingency for $20 million, do you give that $20 million to the project manager, or do you make it 50-50? Do you make it 30% project manager, 70% corporate? How does it work? And that's the allocation that vertically we are talking about. Horizontally, it's a very similar subject as well. Where do you put that bucket of money? And the challenge, the biggest challenge or biggest reason that you need to allocate contingency horizontally, especially the cost contingency, is that you need to produce a reasonable performance measurement baseline. Step back. If you keep the whole bucket, which sometimes is 30%, 40% of the budget as a contingency, right? If you put it as a bucket at the end, your performance curve or performance measurement baseline curve, the curve that you need to measure the progress and report against, it will go up like this, and in the last month, it will jump, which obviously is not true. So if you use that curve, generally you will be reported as underperform. In other words, you're always behind your target. You need to allocate contingency horizontally to make sure that you set a reasonable and achievable performance measurement baseline. And that's the horizontal. And there are a number of ways that people do it. Like you see this one, I put a couple of examples. Like you can actually put it at the beginning of the project. No one does it because that's silly, but you can. You can put it at the end of the project, or you can distribute it along the way. You can allocate it to the phase. You can do it pro rata, and so on and so on. There are a number of different ways that this can be done. Please refer to the full document for further study on this subject. And I think that's getting us to the end of this session, which was trying to give you a little bit about the key areas of concern or key topics under contingency allocation. Just repeating, if you do have, please refer to the full documents, full training documents under the system, or refer to the RES guideline for subject of contingency. You do see my email address. Please keep in touch. And if there is any questions, more than happy to help. So till the next time, good luck with your study. Thanks. Bye.